18th of February 2022.
I'm not interested in words anymore. I want to see action.
Making change, making history, but above all else, making noise.
From news.com.au.
I'm Andrew Bucklow, and I've got news for you. Well, there's no denying that Brittany Higgins and Grace Tame are the two most famous badass women in Australia at the moment, but they're not the first, okay? Australia's history is actually full of barrier-shattering women who haven't received the recognition they deserve. Well, Eliza Reilly is on a mission to change that. She's written a new book called Sheilas, Badass Women of Australian History, and in this episode, she's going to tell us about a bisexual witch from Sydney who revolutionised the art scene, an academic who fought for the right for Aussie women to drink in pubs, and a female First Nations bushranger who busted her lover out of prison. These women are absolutely wild, and their stories are coming up in just a moment.
Okay, the first Sheila I am going to be sharing with you today is real life, dinky die, true blue witch. Yes, witch, Rosalina Norton. She was known as the Witch of King's Cross from Sydney, Australia, and as the author who gets to write about her, I am genuinely spooked and in awe of this woman. She was born at 4 a.m. in the morning during a thunderstorm, and things just got way spookier from there. She decided as a young girl witch that she was going to not sleep in her bed like stupid non-witch girls. She was going to sleep in a tent outside of her house, and she had a pet spider named Horatius, and in her own words she said, "I may be many things, but I am certainly not human." Which, you know, just really sets up such a badass life that she was going to lead. Now Rosaline has grown up. Horatius, her pet spider, has joined her on many adventures, and she's a grown-up witch. And she has chosen to express herself through the form of art. Her artwork has gotten her expelled from the Church of England Grammar School because of her depraved sketches of her pashing the devil and having an orgy with goats. I'm not joking, Google it. And she grew up to be one of the most prolific, psychedelic and surrealist painters of that era in 1940s King's Cross. But that wasn't the only thing that sort of created Rosaline's legend. She was known for being an openly bisexual woman in the 1940s, which is just, it blows my mind. Like, I feel like people have trouble coming out as bisexual today, let alone in the 1940s. But unfortunately, being a witch was against the law in Australia, and I had a hunch that, you know, the police did this in order to sort of get Rosaline, who was making a lot of waves in the art scene. So this is 1940s, post-war Australia, and so the most exciting thing you could do legally was eat a teddy bear biscuit before sunset. So having a sex-positive witch running around saying things like how she was, and I quote, known to enjoy sexual intercourse with gay men. In such situations, I could play the dominant role. It wasn't exactly ideal for those who like their women like their teddy bear biscuits, like plain, cream-coloured and easily digestible. Rosaline was none of those things. So she had this amazing life. She pissed off a lot of cops and a lot of people by just being who she was. And later in life, when Rosaline was asked by an ABC reporter, "Is it difficult being a witch?" she simply replied, "It would be much more difficult not to be." And then, this is real, look this up, she took out a little box and said, "Look, these are real bat's feet. There are not many of them about, and I wear them for earrings. Attractive, aren't they?" And then she puts these bat feet up to her ears, and the ABC reporter is like, "Oh my." Look, you got to give this chick equal points for resilience and for fashion sense. Rosaline is awesome, and next time you want to draw a cheeky drawing of yourself deep throat pashing the devil, just think of her. A Sheila I really want to share with you today is from the 1960s in Queensland. Her name is Merle Thornton, and you probably don't know her story fully, but she really has impacted the way that you party on a Friday and a Saturday and a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Because she is the Sheila that actually helped change the laws to allow women to drink in a pub. I'm not kidding. Turns out, in the 1960s, all the girls were running amok in mini skirts. So short they were metaphors for clothes. We were go-go dancing in cages anywhere we wanted. We were twisting and shaking on lawn bowls probably all around Australia. But it wasn't a swinging time of revolution. It wasn't. Australia was more backwards than a cap on a juvenile delinquent. Women weren't allowed to work in the public sector if they got engaged, and there was no such thing as maternity leave. It was the era of that kind of smart girls aren't pretty girls. And, a woman's education was considered as important as like a dust bunny that you get out of a clothes dryer. And also First Nations women couldn't vote. Your husband could essentially do whatever he wanted to you legally. It was just a really harsh time. And Merle Thornton was an academic, and she was probably feeling like, oh my God, 1960s Queensland, do you know what would make this so much better? Just blowing the froth off a cold one at the end of a hot Queensland day with my girls in the pub. But she wasn't allowed to. It was actually against the law. I don't fully understand exactly why, but it had something to do with the pub being the last space on earth where men could all gather and say whatever they wanted without having to worry about offending the beautiful, dainty ears of the women, and that you could say blue jokes, it was like that locker room talk kind of vibe that they could do whatever they wanted, and there's no way that a woman was going to spoil that. Which begs the question, what do you think that women are doing in their private spaces? Anyway, I'm going to get angry. Moving along, there's a happy ending to this. So Merle had come to Queensland to be an academic. And so she saw the way that women were being treated. They had to stand outside the pub while their husbands got absolutely sloppy-doppy and then had to take them home. And also she felt really excluded when she had a win at work and that she couldn't go celebrate with the boys. She had to go home even if it was her win. So she decided to do the only thing that a woman can do for her quest for a beer. She stormed into her local pub and chained herself to the bar and demanded to have a sippy on a drink. So that didn't go down as well as anyone would have thought. The bar was outraged, the men were furious, and the cops were called. But not just any cop, Jack Herbert, aka the Bag Man. He was later found to be one of the most corrupt, dodgy, just think of that dodgy cop from any movie or film. That's this guy. He is not good news. Not that Merle was to know, as Jack Herbert stormed into the bar and demanded to know where the key was. And her best mate, Ro, who was with her and also chained to the bar, bravely insisted that they didn't want to leave. We weren't breaking any law. We had read the act. We had consulted a solicitor, and it was quite within the law for us to remain in the bar as long as nobody served us a drink, which is the cutest, it's not the jaw-dropping pronouncement that you're going to see in the next Clint Eastwood film, but it was smart. It was strategic. I love these academic girls. They said that they'd lost the key, which was not true, but they were totally chained to this bar, and eventually all the guys sort of thought it was pretty funny, and then the media started to turn up and film the chains and the padlock on their ankles, and Jack Herbert, this big scary cop, was put in a position where he was either going to have to literally throw these girls over his shoulder and wrestle them out, which he did not want because he was a corrupt cop and did not want the attention, or just say okay, girls, but don't drink too much. And he stormed out, and that's exactly what happened. For Queensland in the 1960s, this political act of two beautiful, dainty academic ladies chaining themselves to their local pub, it sent shockwaves around Australia and the world. And eventually they drummed up enough support to overturn the laws, and that was followed closely by a same law in New York City where the girls did the same thing. And so I really take for granted my ability to walk into my local. And it was up to Merle and Ro back in the 1960s to change that for me. And I mean, what is more representative of freedom for ladies than being able to have a one too many? Thank you, Merle. I'll pour one out for you. So I can't talk about Australian history without talking about bushrangers. Australia was teeming with those bad boys from the bush, and quite frankly, we've had a real cultural stiffy for them ever since. We cannot get enough of bushrangers. Ned Kelly, I'm not going to speak about him anymore, but Ned Kelly has 11 frickin' films. 11. But I'm going to tell you about someone who I think deserves even one film. Her name was Marianne Bugg. And she is proof that behind every great Aussie bushranging man, there is an even more badass bushranging Sheila. She's a bold Warramai woman, and she was one of the first female First Nation bushrangers in Australian history. So Marianne grew up in the sort of New South Wales, Gloucester region, and her deep knowledge of local country and her ability to straddle the white English world, because she was raised in an orphanage where she was taught the rich cultural ways of white people. So having that as a superpower and also knowing the space so deeply as a First Nations woman, it just ultimately led her to being one of the most fantastic bushrangers that Australia has ever seen. So, for example, Marianne knew that she was able to ride through the town wearing men's clothes and unaccompanied by a white person if, get this, she just told everyone she was Maori. Because she knew the white people so well that they would just think that Maori was exotic, whereas being First Nations was being gross or something. Okay, so she was starting to become one of the most badass bushrangers in the world. People were really scared of Marianne Bugg. And unfortunately, like many, many great women, she fell in love with the wrong dude, I think. She hitched Frederick Ward, aka Captain Thunderbolt, who was also a bushranger but stole all the credit. Marianne Bugg gathered and hunted food for their gang. She taught all the boys how to read and write, and yet Captain Thunderbolt was the only one that was printed in the newspaper after like a big heist or after they robbed or killed or, partied or did whatever bushrangers do. So even if she was credited in the newspaper for doing something badass, it was like Captain Thunderbolt's girlfriend, Captain Thunderbolt's wife, or some really like racist slurs that no one needs to hear, especially from my mouth. But one of the best adventures that she ever did was when she broke Captain Thunderbolt out of solitary confinement on Cockatoo Island, which, if you don't know, it's like the Alcatraz of Sydney. It's like this prison on this island in the middle of the harbour, and Marianne Bugg waited till dark and swam across a really, really dangerous channel with a big metal file in her mouth. I'm guessing that she didn't practice that swim, and I tried to attempt to do it, and I asked Reddit. I was like, should I do this? And everyone was like, do not do this, you stupid girl. Because not only is it a really dangerous place to cross the harbour, she would have swam directly over one of the biggest shark breeding catchment pools in the whole of the harbour. And so she did this in the dead of night, all to get her boyfriend back, who all of her girlfriends would probably like dump him. But she's like, no, I'm going to go rescue him. Anyway, she broke him out of prison and they went on to have something like 13 children. That's not exaggerating. She had 13 children. And I think that should just be the title of her story. Like, this is the story of Marianne Bugg, a woman who had 13 children, the end. Like, isn't that enough? But no, she rode horseback with probably like this, all these children stuck to her. Like her entire life is newsworthy, but because the media assumed no woman's story could be of like any interest, we actually know far too little about it. And I think that that's an absolute travesty because there probably isn't a better example of, like white Australia's bad habit of holding up some grubby man as a hero and discarding a woman of colour who is literally doing the exact same shit but better than the story of the overlooked bushranger and her illiterate white boyfriend who was there too. Like, we love bushrangers. And if what we love about bushrangers is an underdog story, then there is no one that fits that mold better than Marianne. With all the odds stacked against her, she managed to get her name, her real name, on the record as a revered and feared woman. She's also in Sheilas the book, and she deserves to be remembered up there with some of our nation's most beloved criminals.
That was Eliza Reilly highlighting just a few of the amazing women who haven't received the recognition they deserve. You can check out plenty more in her book. It's called Sheilas, Badass Women of Australian History, and it hits shelves next Tuesday, February 22nd. Thanks for listening to I've Got News For You. I'll catch you again next week.